Hello and welcome into the Volatile Podcast. This is your weekly reminder that being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. My name is Mac Williams, and I'm here with my good friends Jeff Wright and Nick Duncan. We have a very special episode, a jam-packed episode for you tonight, as we will discuss Tennessee basketball. We're going to do our preview for Tennessee baseball, and we're going to have the argument that everyone's been waiting for, which is Joey versus Nico. We have some good discussion, kind of waiting for that. We've been kind of waiting to get at this argument for a little bit. And so we're going to get into that shortly, just after we go over latest news. So, guys, it's been a busy week in the latest news category because Joey Aguilar, we had big news, and then we got even bigger news as of today. And that is the first news was that Joey filed his own lawsuit against the NCAA on Monday. And so that was big news because, he wasn't beholden to that Diego Pavia lawsuit that he was on prior. He was going to do his own lawsuit. And then today we hear that he was granted a temporary restraining order by a judge in Knoxville. So I wanted to just start the discussion right here, guys. Obviously, I think we're all on the same page that we're glad to have Joey back. It's great to have another quarterback in the room, and he likely is going to be your starter. So is this temporary restraining order going to be enough to bring him back for 2026? There was some discussion that Nick saw where they were talking about this might be enough just to get him through the entire season. So what do you guys think? Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I think based on the way the NCAA has not seemed to have had the appetite to, or the will or the ability or whatever, they're just kind of totally defunct. So that when lawyers seem to file these things and judges give restraining orders, they haven't seemed to have had the willpower or the ability to kind of fight back on these things. And so I think this will kick the can down the road in such a way that the NCAA probably will just not make much hay out of it. I think they'll probably drop the appeals and he'll probably be granted another year. Could be totally wrong. It would be the most Tennessee thing ever that this would go totally different than all the other times for all the other schools. But the body of work suggests that Joey Aguilar should be back in 26. So I'm going to say he's going to be on the roster.
Nice. Jeff, what do you think, man?
Well, the temporary restraining order isn't enough to get him in, I don't think. I think there has to be subsequent action. With the Bediako guy, the temporary restraining order let him in against the Vols, but then they had to do, because of the bad weather, they had to do another one to extend it, but the final hearing hasn't been conducted yet. I'm assuming with both of them what Nick said is true. So this decision isn't final, but I assume it's setting up for Joey to come back next year. Nick's right that the NCAA doesn't have an appetite to do anything but beg Congress to fix the problem they created. We've talked about it before, but with the Bediako thing, all you have to do is say none of your wins will count towards NCAA tournament berth, or as long as he's on your roster, you won't be playing in the tournament. They could do that, but they just want to whine to Congress. They don't want to fight in court. They want to whine for Congress to intervene. And this isn't directly to your question, Mac, but I just want everybody to remember Albert Osinga. Was that the baseball player's name?
Osuna.
So the NCAA here again has created their own problem. Osuna did not hire a lawyer. He simply tried to go through the channels with existing precedent about JUCO eligibility, and the NCAA stuck a fork in him. So what they did is teach everybody, go get a lawyer. We'll lay down in front of the lawyer. We'll cry to Congress. Don't try to play under the existing rules of our authority and precedent. You manhandle us in the courtroom. And so everybody learned their lesson. Tennessee learned its lesson. And this is what you get, NCAA. So whatever screaming and crying people want to do about this, you think it's bad for the sport, whatever that is, okay. Blame the NCAA. It is solely their fault.
100%. Now we live in a world where, like most everything else in our lives, we rule by judicial fiat. So judges it's just judicial supremacy, and they're just deciding. We live in a day and age where a Knox County judge is deciding if a young man can play football or not. Same, with Bediako, it was a Tuscaloosa judge. Like and like these judges would be insane not to approve these restraining orders in the towns where these colleges are, right? So like this is just never going to stop until somebody stops it. So
They're in it for the free food, man. Can you imagine? You're like, yeah, I'm the judge that cleared Joey Aguilar for another year.
yeah, guys eating
On my dinner
Calhoun's on the house forever.
for life. For life. Oh, me. Absolutely. In other latest news, Tennessee basketball went 2-0 this week since our last recording. That makes 4 straight wins for the basketballs. We beat Auburn this week, 77-69. That was at home on Saturday night. We also beat Ole Miss at home last night, 84-66. We'll kind of get into those more in depth a little later. And the last little bit of latest news here is that Tennessee baseball is going to begin their season next weekend at home against Nicholls State. So looking forward to seeing the baseballs take the field again. I'm excited to see Josh Elander in year one. And like I said in the opening, we'll cover that in depth here in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and jump into football, guys. So let's rewind, if you can, in your brains back to early April 2024. Or 2025, excuse me. It's early April 2025. We have our quarterback from last year, Nico, who we were all excited, I would say, to see in his second year actually, playing as a starter. And there was some mixed reviews. I think we all saw some things in the first year that were concerning, but there was hope, that he would take a next step and that he would progress in the system. And then we get the news that Nico is demanding more NIL money. And so when that news broke, we were sitting at over and under, if you care about Vegas lines, 9.5 wins. So Vegas, said it was more likely than not. I think it was actually minus odds for both. So it was really just kind of 50-50. But, over 9.5. So could win 10 games, could win 9 games. Whenever you looked, and I know you guys don't gamble or didn't place a bet on that, but whenever you hear that line, putting yourself in that mindset, did you think going into last season that this was a 10-win team? Jeff, let's start with you.
Man, that's a tough question, Mac. I didn't have a lot of confidence in Nico at that point, but I guess I would tell you I thought the team, to stay on schedule for the rebuild and the advancement of the program, should have been a 9 or 10 win team.
Okay. Nick, what about you?
They were obligated. They were obligated.
Yeah, I feel like that line was perfect because, it really felt like they're going to win 9 or 10. Obviously, they didn't. But, with Nico coming back, third year in the program, hoping that he could overcome some of the things that he struggled with in his first year as the starter. I really felt like I felt like their floor was 8-4 and that their ceiling was 10-2, and that it was probably most likely that they would win 9 games. But I felt like 8 or 10 wins were possible.
Sure. I agree that 8 to 10 was possible. I did not think, though, that this was a 10-win team. I was pretty confident in that. I have the gambling statement to show it. I placed that bet in, I think, March, that I did not think this team was going to win over 9.5 games. I took the under. I really thought that our losses on defense were going to be too much to overcome this season, even with a year or two. And again, I know technically Nico's in year 3, but his second year on the field as a starter, I did not think that this team was going to be able to win 10 games. I thought, obviously, it's SEC, anything could happen, so of course 10 is possible just because our schedule was favorable last year. But I really thought that 9 was a realistic ceiling. And so I took the under. So I just wanted to kind of give a context going into this discussion of where we kind of were at. So it seems like y'all were slightly higher on this team before we had the Nico news than I was, but we were all relatively in a similar position. So
yeah, Matt, can I jump in? To give the listeners more context, I remember some specific conversations where you were very like, the defense is going to take a huge step back. I felt like they would not be as good. It was really hard. I mean, how do you live up to the 24 defense? But I absolutely did not think they were going to be near as bad as they were. I thought it would have been somewhere, honestly, like halfway between 24 and 25 defense. So you're talking about a top 10 ranked defense and then like a 90th something ranked defense. I would have thought we were probably in the 30s this year based on what we had coming back. Now we didn't know McCoy wasn't going to play. We didn't know that Ricky Gibson was going to get hurt and not play most of the season. So, but nevertheless, like that defense just was not near as good. So just wanted the listeners to know that I do remember you saying that all the way back in the spring of 25.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and answer this first question here. So based on this, how would you have defined a good season last year? Let's just say, again, we don't know Nico's going to transfer. We've just laid out kind of what we expected of this team. How would you have defined a good season with that team last year before all this drama happened? Nick, you start us off.
I would have defined a good year as winning 10 games. I think full stop.
Yeah, I would have probably just taken a playoff berth.
Okay. Yeah, which, I mean, in as far as we know, that means 10 wins, right? We haven't seen a 9-win team make the playoff yet. So that's basically put y'all at the same spot. I think I would have defined a good year as probably the same as you guys, getting 10 wins, or if you only got 9, if you could find some way to be in contention for playing the SEC championship game because of tiebreakers or whatnot. So I think if you make the SEC championship game, even if you're 9-3, just because of tiebreakers, that's also still a good spot. I would have found that as successful in this year, knowing what I know. I definitely thought 8 was not a good season, and I think sounds like you guys agree with that. So now let's go ahead and so the news with Nico breaks. We, fast forward a month, Joey's coming in. You've got this kid that's played at Appalachian State. We've seen some film. He's transferred to UCLA but never plays. And now we're getting Joey. How did your expectations change, if they did at all? And then, did you expect us to be, what was the ceiling for our team at that point? Jeff, go ahead.
Man, I didn't have a win total in mind. I assumed we wouldn't be as good. But what I think I remember saying at that time is this is a house money season. So whatever he's able to get out of this kid, by doing the right thing, not putting up with Nico's bull, you had to make a decision that the power T was bigger than any player. So at this point, Josh just gets a free pass for the season. If we went below 500 or something, I probably wasn't thinking that was on the table. Just by the way, you can still schedule cupcakes to some degree. But I think my conclusion was much more undefined, other than just Josh gets a free year. We had to do this. It kind of resets the clock.
Nick, what about you?
I definitely believed that the ceiling lowered. I did not think that we could win 10 games at that point and make the playoff. So kind of like Jeff, I don't know that I had a number in my head, but my expectations definitely shifted downwards, where probably if you'd have really put pressure on me, I'd have probably said, if we win 9 games, that's probably about as good as this team could do.
Yeah. So Jeff, I absolutely remember you saying, this season's house money. And I agreed with you about that. What I didn't agree with you about initially that I remembered you saying was that this basically that you told me my expectations had to change, because I was saying, no, if I thought this team was capable of winning 9 games, they should still be capable of winning 9 games. And I remember you kind of encouraging me, like, no, with all this uncertainty, we don't know how good this kid is. That number in your head, whatever it is, has to move. And what really convinced me was you saying that. And then also I watched the Vegas line move, right? So now it was at 8.5 wins instead of 9.5 wins. And so between what you said and me watching that happen, I thought, you know what? I think that's right. So my expectations shifted from what I thought was a 9-win ceiling to an 8-win ceiling with this team with Joey. So now, listener, we're going to go ahead and jump into obviously knowing what we know. So what we know is that Joey Aguilar at times, especially early in the season, showed promise of being a better quarterback than Nico Iamaleava in a lot of ways in this system. And he, again, especially early, showed that he had a higher ceiling when it comes to making the throws that Josh Heupel asked you to make in this offense. So you guys, I don't want to steal your thunder here, so I'll let you talk about it, but you guys kind of took the data from the first few games, and you thought that, this team Joey's better than Nico. Simple as, right? You thought, okay, now that I've seen him play 2, 3, 4 games, however many games it was that convinced you, I think he's a better quarterback. And this is just an incredible, thing that we've stumbled upon, having Joey instead of Nico. Go ahead and talk about that for a minute, Jeff.
Well, I don't know how anybody doesn't watch the Georgia game and think, oh, man, we found some money here, right? You put on jacket you hadn't worn it in a while and you find a $20 bill in the pocket. And so, yeah, I mean, you're definitely describing my experience. I saw Joey as someone who could hit a deep ball. And as you said, that's so important to the system. We haven't had it for multiple years. And yeah, then at that point, my sense of what this team could accomplish went up considerably.
Nick, you would agree with that?
Yep, I'd co-sign that.
Yeah. So I would say for me, I was hopeful that that was true. But going into the season, especially in that Georgia game, when it ends the way that it does, and Joey plays so good, but you still lost. And obviously, none of us, me included, would blame Joey for us losing the Georgia game. I thought the offense did everything they could to put you in a position to win. The defense didn't play as well in that game. Obviously, the special teams was horrible in that game. And then also your coaching was not very good in that game. We got out coached by Kirby Smart, simple as, we, obviously kicking the field goal at kind of near the end of the game that Max missed on third down seemed really dumb. And, we had an extra down, run the ball, get a couple more yards, center it if he likes it centered, get it on the left hash, he likes it on the left, whatever, however he likes to kick it, get it there, and then kick on fourth down. That a lot of us felt that way, I know. So I definitely don't want to blame Joey for that loss, but I didn't feel as optimistic as you guys did after that game specifically. And the reason being is not because I'm, some, savant or I knew, Joey backwards. But what I did know, and I think you guys knew this too, was that coming into the year, we knew that he was kind of an up and down player. We had seen him make incredible throws at Appalachian State, but we'd also seen him throw really bad interceptions at Appalachian State. Now, I will say through the Georgia game, that Georgia game was the first pick he had thrown all year. We hadn't seen him throw an interception. He did throw one against Georgia, maybe two, but I definitely know through one. And that was the first time we saw him, again, thought he played great, but just make a mistake, right? That was really the first time we saw him make an actual mistake that cost you at least something in the game. So after that game, I didn't feel as optimistic as you guys. And then obviously, as we went through the season, we saw much more volatile play from Joey at times. Yeah, we just talked about last episode about, Oklahoma being kind of a really tough game for you specifically, Jeff. And I thought Joey in particular played really poorly in that game. Also, we have the throw against Bama that we talked about a lot last week. So there was a lot of data points after the Georgia game that showed you, well, maybe Joey is exactly who we just saw on film, right? And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So the question I have, and this is where I think we're going to get into a little disagreement here, is should your expectations for the season, so for us, it was 8 or 9 wins after we found out about Joey. Once you see him playing better against Georgia, should your expectations for the team's success at the end of the season be changing as you're getting information or not? Jeff, you kick us off here.
I don't know any way to do it except adjust your expectations. And so if Joey goes out and throws 5 picks, you start dialing down. If he looks better, you start thinking maybe there's a higher ceiling. I mean, I'm kind of going through this with the basketball season already. I had totally checked out on this basketball team like right before the 4-game streak. And I texted you last night, and I was like, I guess I'm talking myself back into it because Ament seems to have found a different gear. Jacoby's scoring the ball. There's still some stupid turnovers. But, like, this is how I get hurt again. I start believing this team can actually be more than what I thought they were 4 games ago. I don't know any other way to do it, man. I think you have to read and react to the data on the field. I just don't. I think I'm setting myself up here, but I just don't know how else to approach it.
Nick, what about you, man?
Yeah, I'm similar with Jeff. I think with this specific team, my expectations shifted down, thinking about just the fact that Joey hadn't played at the level that he was about to play. And then after the first few games, feeling like, okay, it seems like he can hang. And then adjusting back to thinking, 10 wins are on the table again. And so yes, I do believe that based on what you see on the field, a third of the way, halfway through the season, that expectations can change throughout the year based on the evidence you see on the field.
Yeah, and so I do want to be clear here. I don't want to parse words or misrepresent anyone, but I do want to be clear that we're talking about expectations, right? So Nick, you said that 10 wins became possible again once you saw Joey's ceiling, right? Once you saw how he played. So I agree with that. I thought 10 wins was possible once I saw Joey's ceiling. But again, thinking of expectations, my expectation did not change in that I knew it was possible that we saw the Appalachian State version of Joey again. And so I
Sure.
disagree with you guys on this, that I don't believe, especially when I'm looking ahead to a season in its entirety, and then after it's over, I'm looking back on a season in its entirety. I don't believe it's fair, and maybe I'm wrong. We can argue about it. I'd love to. I don't believe it's fair to say this is what I expect of this team going into the season, and then after the season say, well, you know what, they looked better than I thought they would, and so now it was a failure that they didn't reach this new expectation I'd set on them halfway through the season, even though they might have met the expectation I had originally. So I don't disagree with you guys that you know what I the ceiling and the floor can't change, but my expectation for what they're actually going to do never wavered in this season. I really believe this was an 8-win team at best with Joey. And then once I saw, okay, his ceiling is higher than I expected, I knew it was possible that if he played his absolute best, we could win more. But I didn't expect to win more. Does that making sense, the distinction I'm making there?
Yeah, it does. You're talking about basically hopes versus reality, I suppose, is maybe another way to say it. And so I do think, and I think I can, I think I'd argue I look back on this team and that this team was good enough to win 10 games, and that it was not an unbelievably unreasonable expectation to have expected them to have done that, even once I saw Joey start playing better. To put it in another situation, let's say Nico comes back and let's say we expect to win. Let's say I expect to win 10 games. Let's say we're 4-0, and then Nico, gets hurt, and now we got to go to George McIntyre as a freshman. My expectations for that season are about to drastically shift downwards. I am no longer going to expect that this team will win 10 games. And that, it's the same thing as like when Hendon Hooker got hurt. Up until the point that Hendon Hooker got hurt in the 22 South Carolina game, I legitimately expected us to come back and win that game. I don't know that we would have. Everything was going wrong. But the way they played that year and the way they could score points, I just expected that at some point it would flip. And as soon as he got hurt, that just totally changed. Like, I no longer expect to win this game. And so, like, that's another example, to use. And this season was a particularly tough one because we just hadn't seen Joey at that level. And then as soon as I saw him at that level, I was like, okay, I do still think this team is good enough to win 10 games. And I think they should have won 10 games.
It's hard for me to say at this point. I think they should have won 10 games because I didn't realize that McCoy and Gibson were going to sit out the year. I was pretty hyped at Georgia, but I mean, Mac, I don't know if I'm disagreeing with you, but like that factor that McCoy and Gibson are just going to not play. And I'm going to, maybe I'm wrong on this. They're going to decide to not play. I don't know how that doesn't adjust the expectations for what's happening on the field. If I can do the appeal to the absurd, when Marshall's team plane goes down in the field somewhere, I've got to expect that that's going to change my expectations, right? But the other side of that's true too. The season that Dalton Knecht became one of the greatest players in Tennessee basketball history, about 8 games in, I thought, oh, this team's better than I thought. And I just don't know how what happens on the field isn't a float valve for your expectations. Again, I don't know to what degree we're disagreeing, but it's just hard for me to lock in on a stasis when what actually happens in between the opening and closing whistles can vary so, no pun intended, volatilely.
Yeah. No, and I will say your appeal to the absurd, right? Like I would also put injuries in that category of course, like if your starting quarterback gets injured, then your season isn't going to go the way you expected it to. But that's because injuries. If I was going to if I was going to say my expectations have changed because the quarterback got injured, then like we should be factoring in potential injuries at the beginning of the season when we set our expectations. To me, that's kind of off the board as far as like when we're talking about expectations, because of course, like players getting injured or players dying in a plane crash would absolutely impact the season in a way that no one could foresee, right? So to me, I think a
But that
better example.
but
Sorry, go ahead.
it sounds like you're arguing that your expectations can shift downward if something bad happens, but they can't shift upwards if you find a bright light.
No, I'm just saying. I hear you. What I'm trying to say is that if you want to evaluate play on the field and have your expectations change from that, then the conversation needs to not include injury, right? So like injuries happen, that's part of it, but that shouldn't like say, okay, well, we didn't win 8 games now, or we didn't win 9 games. That was my expectation, and it was a failure because these guys got hurt, right? So injuries to me are kind of off the table. What can impact your expectations, I think, if you're gonna what happens on the field impact it, is things like, oh, Joey, looked like a better quarterback, and then he turns out he wasn't as good as he showed at times, or something like that. Some play on normal football things on the field, injuries aside. If we're talking about just that conversation where we take injuries and kind of more outlandish things off the table, my expectations for this team, even when I saw Joey really good and even when I saw Joey really bad, never really wavered because I knew it was possible. And I thought it was probably going to happen that we would see a more human version of Joey Aguilar at some point in the season. So I guess really, old coach adage, a way to say it is like, it's never as good as it seems, it's never as bad as it seems, right? And I kind of hold true to that in sports across the board with my playing background, coaching background. Whenever I see Tennessee playing really well, of course it excites me. Of course I hope it continues. Of course I hope that they're consistent in that. But it doesn't change my expectations and how I would define success or failure at the end of the season if it turns out those players could not maintain that level of excellence throughout the year.
Right. So, like to what I was saying, it sounds like you're saying, okay, I expect that they'll win 8 games, but if Joey comes out and plays 4 awesome games, it's unrealistic to think that he could be consistent in that and that they could win more than that. But if your quarterback gets hurt, it's appropriate to shift your expectations downwards and then just be excited if they overshoot it. That's what it sounds like the argument is to me.
Yeah.
Like you can never shift positively just because someone's exceeding your initial expectations. Like to me, if I think a team is here and they prove that their ceiling is here, but then they don't meet that, like to me, it's not an unreasonable expectation to have watched Joey play that Georgia game and to expect that he would have played better than he did against Oklahoma. Now, you just probably read that season better than me, but I don't think that's like an unreasonable expectation to have seen him play like that and then expect him to play maybe not that good every game, but to play at a level of consistency where he could beat Oklahoma. And if they beat Oklahoma, I think the Vanderbilt game is much different if they have something to play for when they go there. So I just think it's potentially a little inconsistent, but I'm willing to be persuaded. Jeff's wanting to say something.
Well, I mean, honestly, Mac, initially, I thought your point argued in favor of my conclusion because I mean, I don't know how important cornerback is compared to quarterback, other than quarterback is more important. I don't know how losing your top 2 cornerbacks equates to losing one quarterback, right? So I guess I'm just going to say I think every fan reads and reacts to what's happening on the field. To your point about injuries as a factor in how you expect going into the season the team to play, I just don't know how to take that off the table either. Because when Coach Heupel is designing, or whatever special teams quote or whatever, they're working from, okay, plan A is with these guys. Plan B, we rotate this guy in. Plan C is what do we do in a catastrophe, right? But because injuries can't be factored in, you have to start with the assumption that you have your team. Then you have a backup plan. Then you have a C plan. And so I don't know how you can go into projecting a season's outcome without saying we just have to assume everybody's healthy. Then when an injury shows up or a Boo Carter situation plays out the way it does, you go, okay, that's pushed us back into plan B, or that's pushed us back into plan C. The ceiling of expectations comes down. I don't know what other alternatives there are.
No, and I agree. What I'm saying is that if you say, okay, let's set our expectations based on everyone's healthy. You guys would have said you expected this team to win after we know it's Joey and Nico's gone. You guys would have said we expected to win, what, 9 games? Is that right?
Yeah, at best.
Yeah,
that's
at
what
best. But again, I was thinking house money, right? And
Sure.
and there's where my inconsistency is, because Joey threw the ball against Alabama. I believe that's a Heupel problem, and so I'm not really locating that as much in Joey as I am Heupel. And Heupel didn't get injured; he didn't have a stroke and get brain damaged, right?
That we know of.
So, man, I just think you have to assume like it's an NCAA football game. I've got my roster. My injuries are going to show up, but I have to kind of game plan for the best case scenario.
Right. And so in that world, like we're setting our expectations based on the roster as it is, assuming there's no injuries. I thought this team with Joey was an 8-win team. And so let's go ahead and reframe the conversation here. So would you say this season was a failure based on your expectations as you were calibrating throughout the season? Was this season a failure to you, Jeff?
Post Georgia, yes. And again, I'm not sure if it matters, but I'm going to locate that in Heupel more than I am Joey.
Sure.
I'm much more, I don't expect Jermod and Ricky to sit out the whole season. I do expect any quarterback to have a bad pick at some point in the season. And maybe that's inconsistent. But Joey playing poorly against Oklahoma, I figure every quarterback's going to have one of their, there's going to be a worst game in the course of a season. He may throw a stupid pick like against Alabama. Those things seem much more unacceptable to me at a coaching level than it does with Joey's play. So I think Joey was very serviceable. I think Heupel did a bad job this year. And again, just to get back to the quick answer, post Georgia, yes, I think this team disappointed.
Yeah. Nick, what about you, man?
Did not meet expectations. Failure.
Yeah. And so I think this is where we really differ, right? It's because I did not change my expectations throughout the year. My expectations were 8 wins. We got to 8 wins. I would not call the season a failure because I think Joey turned out to be exactly who we thought he might be or could be and probably was going to be based on what we had seen in his entire career at various stops. And
you think Joey was only as good as what you understood him to be from Appalachia State or whatever?
I thought he had flashes of moments where he was better than I thought he could be. And I thought he had flashes of moments where he was worse than I thought he would be. And so to me, when I see those two, outliers of data, I say, okay, what's actually happening is probably somewhere in the middle. It's probably what I originally expected, which is, he's going to be a player that makes some great plays, but also makes some really boneheaded plays. And again, that puts me at 8 wins. That's what it put me at last year. I thought this team met the expectations that I had. Even now, after we've lost to Illinois, after we finished 8-5, not even 8-4, I think that this team did exactly what I thought they were probably going to do, which is win 8 games.
Yeah, I mean, we're disagreed on that. And I'm also disagreed that like this is the Joey that we should have expected coming out of his Appalachian State career. I think he played better. I think this was the best version of Joey we have seen thus far, and I'm hopeful that we see even a better version next year. And so,
I
I mean,
also
if you
think you keep saying, Jeff, you're not locating it in Joe, you're locating in Hopple. I mean, that's where I'm at. That this defense should not have taken the step back that it did, even without Ricky or without McCoy. I don't give him a pass for that. Even like there were so many other elements of that defense that took massive steps back that should not have. And it's up to Hopple to know what the situations are. Like again, we keep going back to it. It's the worst part of the whole year, in my opinion. We talked about it in the last podcast. That pick against Bama is just all coaching. Um, even with like the Oklahoma game, you've just got to have your guys ready to play. And if Joey has the ability to play at a higher level than that, Hopple should have him ready to go. And that's the one game that the defense played pretty well, and they should have won that game. They should have beat Georgia. They should have beat Oklahoma. I can't say they should have beat Bama, but they were in that game and should have been more competitive than they were. And I just think the Vandy game is totally chalked up to, no gas left because there's nothing left to play for.
Yeah, they were checked out.
Yeah, so I think that the whole team took a step back on the defensive side more than the offensive side. But the offensive side, you can selectively look, in my opinion, and say there are ways in which Hopple coached that he could have coached differently and coached this team to 10 wins. So, yeah, I guess we're just disagreed. But
yeah. So we won the 8 games with Joey. Let's go ahead and get into Joey versus Nico specifically. What do you believe our record would have been? So we're sitting today, but Nico was our quarterback this past season. What was our record in 2025 with Nico playing in his second year as a starter, as opposed to the 8 wins we got with Joey? Do you think that changes at all? How do you think it changes? Jeff starts off.
Well, again, my expectations were where we were obligated to be on the growth pattern, with the advent of Heupel's administration. And so it's hard to answer this question without knowing. I hate watch Nico play for UCLA. But I think we were under an obligation to be a playoff contender this year. And so it wasn't because I was doing the cumulative math of the roster and saying, this is what we should expect to do. I was saying Heupel has now reached a level of expectation that he's responsible to deliver. So I still think with Nico, we should have been a playoff team. I think with Joey, we should have been a playoff team. Is that a sufficient answer? I'm not trying to duck it. That's where we're at.
I'm curious though, like gun to your head, how many games do you think we would have won with Nico being the quarterback of this team? Knowing what we know, knowing Jermod and Ricky sit out, knowing Boo is a mess and a train wreck on the field. How many games do you think this team actually wins if you just plug Nico in for all the games?
Same or less. I think Nico's a worse quarterback.
Yeah, I'm on the fence on this one. I'm riding the fence. I need to be persuaded one way or the other. I think Joey's a better quarterback than Nico. I think it's possible that this team's better just because it's Nico's third year in the system. They can do more stuff on the offense. I think it's possible that, if I look at a game like the Mississippi State game, I don't know that Nico can win that game on that last drive. But is the offense just more efficient already at that point in the season with Nico just because it's running, it's just smoother operations, Are there more plays? Is the playbook broader? Those are things that I just can't know because I'm not in the locker room and I don't know how long it takes to install an offense. I guess I would think about it this way. If Joey had been at Tennessee as long as Nico, it's his third year in the system. It's going to be his second year starting. I expect he is better at that point than he was this year, and I also expect that he's better at that point than Nico would have been this year. But I think it's possible that Joey on short time and Nico having been in the system longer, I think there's a possibility that the team overall is better. But I don't know.
That seems reasonable, Nick. But again, that's why I started with I saw Nico play for UCLA this year.
Yeah, that to me, that's also difficult because it's the same situation. He's plugged in at the end. He's got to learn a new offense, and that team's clearly pitiful.
Yes.
Like really
but he
bad.
still makes incredibly stupid decisions.
Sure.
And that's the thing that maybe next year he overcomes it and my take looks worse,
Yeah.
but
their coach also got fired and they immediately got a lot better. So there's just a lot of factors for me to definitely say that he was just bad that he was. Again, it's like if he's at UCLA 3 years, is he as bad as he was this year?
Maybe we'll get to find out next year, I guess. But
yeah, I think more time, especially if Joey gets to come back, I think more time will help with this conversation. We can revisit it.
But I'm just going to go back to it though. Joe Milton was a bad quarterback. It just is a bad quarterback, and I've seen him in systems where he's been there for a couple of years. I've seen him in the pros. He's just not a good quarterback. And I think that's much more Nico's paradigm than kind of the old narrative about Garantano, that there's just too many offensive coordinators and things like that. Somebody on Eric Kane's call-in or where they submit questions said, is the idea of too many coordinators just a forgotten concept now? Because players move around, because of NIL and the transfer portal, they move around, they're expected to compete well in their next spot. One of them, was every quarterback in the Final Four of the playoffs this year a transfer quarterback?
Good question.
Oregon, yes. Weren't they in the Final Four? Yeah. Indiana, yes. Miami, yes. Ohio State, was that the Final Four, or did Miami beat Ohio State before that? Oh, no, Ole Miss. Ole Miss. Yes, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So the idea of it's a hard time picking up the offense. 4 teams figured it out at a really high level. I think probably we just have to. That's probably just not part of the argument anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it was more part of the argument when that was happening sporadically at a few places across the country, but now it's just something everyone's dealing with all the time. So everyone is just kind of lowered and probably has to be graded on a different scale.
Or coaches have to figure out a way to quickly catch players up to speed, right?
Yeah. And obviously some are doing that better than others, right? That seems to be objectively true. So,
Well, to answer the question for myself, I think this team was going to win 8 games with Nico. Now, again, my expectations were higher by a game, but once you do, like you said, once you see Joey, I guess to put it in simple terms, I think Joey's ceiling turns out to be higher than Nico's, but his floor is also lower. So I think that Nico, probably how the season plays out if Nico's our quarterback, is we still win 8 games because the defense was going to take a step back. They did take a step back. They took a bigger step back than some of us thought.
Took 5 steps back.
I think that Nico was an 8-win quarterback on this team, given all the circumstances that we know. I think that was what it was going to be either way. I think what changes is, for example, you probably don't beat Syracuse as bad as you beat them. I think you still win that game, but you probably don't beat them as bad. Simultaneously, I think that the Oklahoma game or the Bama game might be a little bit closer, but you still lose. So I think that Nico, if he was our quarterback for this past season, wouldn't have changed any of the outcomes ultimately. But I do think the margin of victory and the margin of defeat probably would have been a little tighter because of the simple fact that Nick pointed out that, Nico would have been more comfortable in the system than Joey was, even though I think I agree with you guys. And this is why I said leading off the show that Joey coming back next year, I think could change this argument. But I think that Joey is actually a better quarterback than Nico, at least in college. I obviously think that Nico has a better skill set and he could be a better player. But based on what we've seen, I don't think that Nico is objectively a better quarterback than Joey is. But I think that either guy would have won you 8 games this year, and that's probably actually as good as they could have done. So I say again, so another thing I want to say is I think that this season would have been more of a failure for me had Nico stayed and we went and the season goes exactly, let's just say it goes exactly the way it played out. To me, that I would have called that season a failure with Nico at the helm. But once you have Joey in there and we still win the 8 games that we would have won, if I'm correct, then to me, I can't define that season as a failure because I expected us to win 8 games. I expected Joey to have good games and bad games. That's exactly what happened. So to me, it just wasn't a failure. And I don't think that changing the quarterback actually changes the outcome of any game super significantly. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, we're disagreed. I get that. But just to register the full disagreement, I also don't believe Nico's basement is higher than Joey's. I've never seen Joey run out of bounds to finish a critical game. I have seen Joey hit a deep ball in a way I've never seen Nico really do that. And so the only way I can buy that, and I'm like 20% open to the idea, is that if Josh had thought strategically he had found a way to hide Nico's weaknesses, maybe Joey tempts him into throwing the ball more than he would have with Nico, and he doesn't lean on Deshaun as much. I could buy that. I'm open to 20% that like Josh with more time has a way to craft a game plan that covers over Nico, but I don't locate that in Nico. I locate that in Heupel having advanced time to prep and plan. I just think Nico's bad.
He's a bad actor, that's for sure.
I think that Nico could be. I think he could be bad. To y'all's point, I do think that this season will tell us more information about Nico
and Joey
and Joey, yes, both than we've had based on the 1 year of data we've had with them at their respective schools. So I do think that this coming year, assuming you get Joey back, and obviously Nico's going to be back at UCLA, I think that this year will tell you more. But again, I think there's a little bit of a caveat there in that Nico does have a new coach. So what does that mean? Does that change a lot of things? I don't think it's gonna. I'm not trying to carry water for the guy. I have no love lost for Nico, but I do think that he probably would have been more serviceable. It's exactly what you're saying, Jeff, where I think that we maybe wouldn't have aired it out so much and played a more conservative game like we saw us do in 2024 with Nico. I think that probably would have been more like the game script. And I do think that lends itself to what I said, which is maybe your losses aren't as bad, but also maybe your wins aren't as good.
Yeah. I mean, the only point I have there is just what I said. Don't really locate that in Nico. And I mean, also Nico had Dylan Sampson. We all love Deshaun. I'm not sure Deshaun's willing or ready or able to be what Dylan was.
No.
That's why I'm saying it's like 20% possible in my mind. I just don't think Nico's much, and I think there's something to Joey.
Yeah, it's hard to know how those games would have went. It's hard for me to think that we could have scored enough points to keep up with Georgia with Nico. So like Max said, the loss is probably worse. It's hard for me to think that Nico the Mississippi State game is really the crux of this for me.
Yes.
It's the one that pushes me towards Joey, is because we could not run the ball in that game. Could not run the ball. And until all of a sudden we could in overtime, for reasons unknown. But that last drive that Nico or that Joey led us on, there's nothing Nico's ever shown me that made me believe that he could do that. He had an opportunity to do that against Arkansas, and we watched it with our naked eyes go awful. And so that's probably the game that makes me that is just, I'm probably like 60-40 persuaded that this season is better. The flip side of that is kind of the Oklahoma game, like running out of bounds with no time left is the worst possible thing. But if you think about the body of work of a whole game, has Nico ever thrown as many bad picks in one game? What did he? Probably UCLA, yes. When last year, did he ever play as bad as Joey played in that game I think the answer is probably no. I don't know if that means that we win that game, but I think that's probably the biggest factor on the other side of the argument. But I think we should have won the Georgia game, and I think there's no chance that happens with Nico. And I think we should have won that football game. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation and one that we've argued a lot. And I think as more times passed, it's gotten more civil. But right after the season, I can remember it being a pretty hot topic with us. Go ahead.
We have more consensus now. We were probably here, and now we're maybe like here.
Yeah, exactly. I just really believed. I mean, the day that the season ended, and you're waiting on this bowl game, I just sat there and thought, I think the season went the same way, no matter who your quarterback was. Now, I would like to just take a moment before we move on from this discussion to say I would rather roll the dice and have Joey as my quarterback. So I'm not sitting here trying to say like I wish we had Nico back or anything like. I like Joey better as a person, as a player. I like his attitude. I like his leadership. To me, he strikes me as someone I would prefer personality wise as my quarterback over Nico. And then also, like I said, I do think his ceiling's higher. And with a guy like Josh Heupel, I'd like to think he can get the best out of a quarterback. And so I would rather roll the dice with Joey. So I'm happy that we have Joey. I'm happy that we made the trade. I'm glad it turned out the way it did. But to me, 8 wins this year with the quarterback you had, with the defense you had, with the coach that you had, that feels about right. And I just can't call it a failure.
No, man, you don't get to do that. I'm telling Joey that you hate him and you think Nico's better.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's the way this goes this day and age. I heard all of that, and my question just is like, why do you hate Joey Aguilar? I mean,
exactly.
Clearly you do.
Well, last football thing, and then we'll move on to basketball. So going back to the restraining order that Joey filed today. So assuming he comes back, assuming that buys him enough time, I think, Nick, you mentioned that this restraining order could get him through the next calendar year, which would obviously be the entire season.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think what Jeff said's right. More stuff has to happen, but I think this is the catalyst that means that stuff probably happens.
Okay, so let's just assume that it does. He is on the roster for the 2026 season. He is going to start, right? Is anyone believing he's not going to start?
No, he's going to start.
Okay, so if he does start, assuming he starts, do you lose George McIntyre at the end of the season? Yes or no? Jeff, go ahead.
Man, there's a dedicated listener of Volatile that I've been having this conversation with regularly who does not want Joey back because it means we lose George or Faison. Here's what I would say. We're going to lose George or Faison. We just do it now a year further out with more time to evaluate which one you want to try to keep. So one of those guys is not going to be the other one's backup. It's just not going to happen. And now that there's not a spring transfer window, we get to keep all three of them, Lord willing, that there's still college football and a meteor doesn't strike the earth. We get a full year to figure out which one of them we want to be the successor to Joey. And so I don't think there's a scenario where you don't lose one of them. I think that the best possible scenario where knowing you're going to lose one of them that's available to the Vols is to have a full year to vet which one you want to try to retain. And with Joey here, we also get to have a higher ceiling on this coming season than I think we would have having to pick between GMAC and Faison going into this season. So this is why Joey's not going to get eligible. This is actually what works out best for the Vols. And so Joey's probably going to go to federal prison or something.
Turns out he didn't pay taxes on his NIL money, and he's cooked.
Nick, same question to you, man. So if assuming Joey comes back, that's what we're working in right now. Do we lose GMAC or Faison?
Yeah. I think you definitely lose one of them at some point. I guess to fully answer this question, I think I need to understand the new portal season. So maybe you guys can help me understand. Am I correct in that there's only now one portal opening, assuming your coach doesn't leave, and that it's a winter portal like the one we just experienced? There's no more post-spring practice portal. Is that correct?
That's generally correct. There is an extended portal window after the national championship game for the teams who played in it.
Sure.
So by and large, yes, Nick. There's also that sometimes players will go in super late.
Yeah.
That's probably how we got that cornerback from Miami.
Yeah. So knowing that, which is that is what my understanding was. So it's hard for me to believe you keep both those guys without that post spring practice portal window. I think if you had spring practice portal window, that you might hang on to both of them because they know Joey's leaving. They're going to duke it out in spring practice, and then one of them would take off.
But wait, Nick, it sounds like you agree one of them is still going to leave.
Yeah.
It's just the time frame.
It's just the timing. It's just the timing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my conclusion too.
Yeah. So knowing that, whichever one of them it looks like or whatever the feel is, probably in the locker room, one of them's probably going to take off. We want to take bets on who that is.
Oh, I think it's George McIntyre, 100%. I think that if, again, Joey's back for the 2026 season, George and Faison are duking it out for the second string role. I think at the end of the 2026 season, to y'all's point, one of those two guys is going to be gone for 2027. And I think it's George because I think Faison, even if he doesn't outright win the job, Josh Heupel's going to go with the more highly touted, more flashy player like we saw him do with Joe Milton, like we saw him do. I think you're going to get Faison in 2027 either way is what I'm saying. Assuming that Joey comes back this year, Faison's your quarterback in 2027 because G-Mac's gone. That's what I think.
I just felt my terminal illness like welling up inside of me while you spoke. Like it just flared up real bad.
And obviously, I don't know which one's better. I mean, there's a part of me that likes George better. No offense to Faison, just because George is from Tennessee, he grew up a Tennessee fan.
Yeah.
Right. There's just a part of me that would prefer him to win the job and be the guy in 2027. But that's
built like Peyton Manning.
Right. Obviously, that's totally just biased because I love Tennessee, and I don't care, frankly, which one. I don't care which one wins the job. I want the best guy to win the job. So if that's Faison in 27, great. If it's George in 27, great. But to y'all's point, if I had to pick one, I think George is leaving at the end of this year, assuming that Joey comes back.
Probably right.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to basketball. So again, we won 2 home games this week. We've won 4 straight. We beat Auburn and Ole Miss. We don't have to spend too much time here, but let's talk just a second about the Auburn game. One note that I made was that the Auburn game felt really similar to the Kentucky game in the fact that we had a nice sizable lead in the first half, and then Auburn ended up making that a game. Same with Kentucky, except for it felt like to me Tennessee played better down the stretch against Auburn to find a way to win that game. Now, obviously, Auburn is not the team that Kentucky is, but, it felt like to me that we at least managed the late game scenario slightly better than we did against Kentucky. Do y'all have anything to add about that game?
No, it's just it's frustrating to exactly what you said, Mac, because if they managed it better, is that because they have learned, or is that because Auburn's not as good? And
by not as good,
my terminal condition, I'm willing to believe it's that they figured something out, which means I'm going to get hurt again very soon. Saturday.
There's just the only thing I took away from that game is this ain't your daddy's Coach Pearl.
That's right, baby. Former VFL Stephen Pearl.
Whatever.
Oh, me.
Buddhist man.
Yeah, and obviously, we'll talk about it more, but, again, in the Auburn game, the only other thing was that Nate Ament played great again. So, he's kind of streaking right now. He's strung a few great games together, and I hope that continues. In the Ole Miss game, I thought this win was particularly impressive for 2 reasons. One, I didn't really think about until Jeff brought it up. So, Jeff, I'll let you talk about that. But the other thing was that I felt like you got the best version of Jalen Carey that we've seen in the last however many, probably since in 2026. We haven't seen him play as good as he did.
2 weeks of the season.
Yeah. Right. And that was particularly impressive because obviously we were down Felix. Felix didn't play against Ole Miss. So I thought whenever I heard, Felix isn't playing, that could be trouble for us, especially with the way Ole Miss likes to play, tough and aggressive, which is kind of what Jeff talked about. So I don't want to steal his thunder there, but I was really impressed with Jalen Carey, how he played that game. Obviously, Nate Ament carried you offensively. Don't want to bypass him, but again, he's strung a few of these games together that now I'm starting to, as you guys said, I'm starting to believe Nate Ament might be the player that we thought he could be after all. But Jeff, go ahead and talk about the game script as far as Ole Miss trying to push Tennessee around that you mentioned to me.
Yeah, that was the first thing that kind of came off the TV, is that Ole Miss thought they were going to beat up on Tennessee. There was that really early, I say really early, it was when I first realized it. But you remember, we thought for a minute there Nate Ament may have gotten hurt because they were doubling him in the corner. I can't remember if it was in front of our bench or theirs, but they were doubling in the corner. And I think 88, their big man, just kept moving forward while double teaming him. And it kind of like tweaked his knee.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, they are trying to, I mean, it's not comparable, but like the 2026 version of the Detroit Pistons, they're going to try to bully these guys and beat up on them. And that's why this has felt like the most impressive Nate Ament game. The downside is Ole Miss is not good.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff Nate Ament did is replicable against better competition because he's finding a way to power past people who are beating up on him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I came away like, oh, this is the most, I mean, what I just said, it's the most impressive Ament game because he was finishing through contact. He was getting back up after getting knocked down. He was making crazy shots with guys hanging on him. That is replicable. I don't know if it's replicable if there's a better talented team that decides to be rough, but I'm willing to be hurt again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our team is better at rebounding than your team. Like, that's the thing that I'm taking away from the last 2 weeks, is that fundamental basketball works. And when you hit free throws and when you rebound the basketball, you have a chance to win every game. So they out-rebounded Auburn 46-30. They out-rebounded Ole Miss by 17.
Our team is better rebounding against mid-tier teams.
Well,
better rebounding against your mid-tier team.
They out-rebounded by almost the same margin the two previous teams that are much better, Georgia and Alabama. So it's not just the mid-tier teams the last couple of weeks. But 17 offensive boards against Ole Miss. I think that's impressive even against Ole Miss because that's their jam, right? It's like they're going to push you around and bully you. And Nate Ament had 6 rebounds against I think he had 8 rebounds to go along with his,
29 points.
29 points, yeah. So it's all good to me. I mean, both those teams are bad though, so they're real bad.
And Jacoby had a good night offensively. I think Nate's going to overshadow that, but he had a good night offensively.
I'll say he had a good night when he stops throwing the ball all over the place.
Yeah, that's fair. The Nate thing is obviously the best news, I guess, but I can't tell y'all how excited. Listener, you don't know because it's our group chat, but you may have seen on social media that there was footage and a report about the footage that Boswell was practicing his free throws after the Ole Miss game. And this is what we've talked about on a previous episode. You actually can get better at free throws if you find the time to put more time in on it during the season. And this kid is just becoming like a Jawan Jennings to me. I just love this kid.
He had 8 boards, bro.
Yeah, man. There was one he rebounded off a missed free throw and he got knocked down. And I was like, that's exactly what I want to see from my guards on a free throw setup. I'm really I'm not alone, but I'm just really becoming infatuated with him as a heart and soul player. And I think he's coming into the VFL Hall of Fame.
He is the only reason why I potentially might back off of my black pill about Cade Phillips, because Bishop Boswell may be sliding into that role.
Hey, I'll give you a substitute black pill. Jalen Carey can be good, or Felix Okpara can be good, but they can't both be good at the same time.
I had the same thought.
But JP Estrella's good again, so it's a wash.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Nick, that's a huge white pill that Estrella has found his groove. But yeah, it just seems to me that like very different physical builds. Maybe Akbar and Carey are the same player, and if they're on the court together, they're going to
It
neutralize
just
each other.
doesn't work.
Yeah, I definitely left feeling the same thing, Jeff. It's like, why can't Jalen play this way when Felix is in the lineup? And then, it just is really frustrating that they can't seem to find it on the same night.
It's a Tennessee thing.
Yeah. So this Saturday, we go on the road to Kentucky. That game's on ESPN at 7:30 Saturday night. Obviously, this is, the biggest game up to this point in the season. And the last time you lost a game was to Kentucky. So I'm really excited and anxious to see what this team does on the road against Kentucky, who's trending upwards. I think it was, I can't remember. Is the guy, Jimmy Dykes. Jimmy Dykes was on the call for the Ole Miss game, if I remember correctly. And he said in that broadcast that Kentucky has the most impressive win of the season on the road at Arkansas of any team that he's seen. And that surprised me just because, I'm not paying close attention to teams outside of the SEC right now. And so, but to hear, that Jimmy Dykes says that he thinks that's the most impressive win got me really thinking, yeah, I think this game Saturday, of course, other than it's a rivalry game and you're trending up right now in the SEC, I think this game is huge and has a lot of implications.
Oh, yeah. And you want to get the, there's a term for this in professional wrestling, but you kind of want to get squared away with the win-loss against your rival, right? Like this is your comeback game. So, yeah, it means a ton. And I'm going to increasingly think that Tennessee can win this game up until they tip off, which probably means a 30-point loss.
Yeah, so I did want to end there with basketball. Just yes or no, is Tennessee going to win Saturday, Nick?
Oh my grief!
Back.
This is killer. I was hoping we wouldn't have to do this. I believe that no SEC team has beat Kentucky more than my Volunteers. So, yeah, we're going to win at Rupp.
Let's go, Jeff.
Yeah, Nate Ament has found his groove. I can't believe that I'm saying that on record. Nate Ament.
We need a rewind to like flash to earlier episodes to hear ourselves.
I'm going to like be thinking about how to weight myself down and jump in an icy river after the game. But yeah, gun to my head today, Nate Ament has found his groove. This team has recommitted to Rick Barnes style basketball. Jacoby's not going to torpedo us in a crucial moment. And we come out of Rupp with the kind of success we've come to expect against Kentucky at Rupp.
I love it. Yeah, I think we're gonna win. All right, so baseball. Let's get into it. This is what we kind of been building up towards. Tonight's our kind of baseball preview because, like I said earlier at the beginning, that Tennessee opens its season next Friday night against Nicholls State at home. So I just want to run through really quick weekend series throughout the season and we'll start with home series. So at home this year, Tennessee plays, and this is in order of when we play them: Nicholls State, Kent State, Wright State, home of the Fighting Jeffs, Mizzou, LSU, Ole Miss, Bama, and Texas. So those are your home series this year for the Tennessee baseballs. Guys, obviously, I think we all would say we're going to beat Nicholls State in that series. We're going to beat Kent State in that series. We're going to beat Wright State in that series.
Hey.
Of course we're going to beat Wright State because Drew Gilbert is forever their daddy.
That's right. He buried them, and they will never recover.
Never recover.
5 SEC series at home this year: Mizzou, LSU, Ole Miss, Bama, Texas. Let's go through these real quick, and I know none of us have probably done a deep dive on these series. How many of these 5, what do you think Tennessee's record is? And this is a series record, so it could be 5-0, 4-1, 3-2, yada yada. How many of these series do you think Tennessee wins at home? Nick, go ahead.
Hit me with them one more time.
Missouri, Louisiana State, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas.
4-1.
4-1. Love it. Jeff?
Just totally defer to y'all. Y'all know that I'm much more new to the sport, and particularly college. Just LSU jumps off that list to me. I'm assuming we don't go undefeated, so I'm going to pick LSU and say we go 4-1.
Yeah, I think 3-2 is more likely for the. I mean, it's just hard to win a lot in baseball, and you have to think that Tennessee does take some micro step back, even if it's just not even a step back long term, but just the transition, everything that's changed on the team with Vitella leaving and Elander stepping in his place. You got to think that Tennessee's slightly weaker this year. Now, obviously, Tennessee recruits well every year. Tennessee's becoming a perennial powerhouse in baseball. It's very possible Tennessee's the best team in the country again by the time we get to postseason play. But I think 3-2 is more realistic there. Your away series this year, and these are all SEC series. We don't host anybody, or we don't go on the road anywhere other than the SEC for a weekend series. So on the road, you've got Georgia, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Kentucky, and Oklahoma. So you got 5 road series in the SEC as well. Again, that's Georgia, Vandy, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Oklahoma. What's your record in those 5 series, guys? Jeff, go ahead.
Totally naive pick again, but there's not like an LSU that jumps off the table there with me. So we're going undefeated on the road, guys. That's what's going to happen.
Let's go. Let's
Mark
go.
it down.
We are not 3-2.
Nate Ament is going to really help us.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
He's just like Smalls. He's so tall. Just stand out there and we'll do the rest.
Yeah, so I think Georgia is becoming a better program. They're really trending up. That's a weird part, kind of an odd place to play. I don't mean to say it, but I think 3-2 is realistic there as well. So I think at the end of the season you're going to have 4 series losses. So that's 8 losses, at least in those games. And so I think that's pretty realistic.
So you're saying 6-4, and I'm saying 7-3.
Yep.
Hates Joey, hates Josh Elander.
Jeff, 9-1. 9-1.
Such a negavol, this guy. Unbelievable.
Hates the Jays. Big J hater.
The last thing I want to talk about as far as the schedule goes is February 27th through 29th. You're playing in Globe Life Field where the Rangers play for the Amagi Bank College Baseball Series. So in those 3 games, we will play UCLA, Arizona State, and Virginia Tech. So we've got 3 kind of fun games there where you get to play teams you don't normally play: UCLA, Arizona State, Virginia Tech. This, to me, feels like a Tennessee sweep. I think Tennessee takes all 3 of those games a month into the season.
Really?
It started off hot. Yeah, I do. I really do think so.
UCLA is supposed to be really good.
Yeah, I think that's the toughest game. The reason I'd like us to win all 3 is because I like us to win on Friday night. We play UCLA on Friday night. Okay. I think Tennessee is going to be very good on Friday night this year.
Yeah.
And Nico's going to figure out a way to screw that up for UCLA.
Oh, my gosh. This man.
You cannot underestimate the suckage.
Does Big Nick come watch that game? That's what I want to know. Will Big Nick be in attendance to hate pull against the Vols?
He'll be watching the volleyball team.
Got him. Roasted him.
So let's go ahead and move on to our roster. So the first thing we'll do is we'll talk about who we lost from this past season. So kind of the names that we
lost. Tony V. Thanks, Danny White.
Yep, right. So obviously Tony Vitello.
Go Lady Vols.
Oh my gosh.
Take my money.
So obviously the first big name is Tony Vitello, right? So you're resetting that. Also, you lost Frank Anderson, you lost Q, the strength and conditioning, coordinator, or whatever, coach, or whatever his title was. So you've got a lot of turnover as far as coaches go. And I do think that lends itself to be the biggest question mark on the team. What does it look like under new leadership? And obviously there's no way to really predict or know. I personally think that Josh Elander's going to do a good job. I think that there's not going to be a ton of step back. I think this is a team that can go to Omaha. But aside from the coaches, we lost the biggest name for Tennessee fans, of course, is that for the first time since COVID, since the pandemic, Tennessee is going to take the field without Hunter Inslee. So no Hunter Inslee this year. Yep, Hunter, we love you, VFL, iconic player. But obviously Hunter Inslee was not the best player on the team last year. There it is. There's a signature. It wasn't the best player on the team last year. Obviously, key player, important player. But the kind of names that you lost last year, the biggest names are Gavin Keelan, which is a transfer guy we got last year from Louisville, Andrew Fisher, Liam Doyle, both Ole Miss transfers you got last year. Those three are kind of the biggest three names that you lose. In addition to those guys, we lost some arms. So Marcus Phillips, AJ Russell, Nate Snead, and Tanner Franklin. So those four guys we lost from the rotation. So those are kind of your big names that aren't going to be on the team this year that you're kind of used to seeing. Of those guys, who are you going to miss the most? Nick, go ahead.
Oh, Hunter Inslee. I mean, it's not, no question. I mean, guy gave us all, guy ran through walls, guy matrixed over catchers to slide into home and willed the Tennessee Volunteers to a national championship. And, yeah, I mean, the guy's a legend forever. Build a statue of him. I don't know why they haven't already. Yeah, I mean, there's no other name. It's Hunter Inslee.
Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Inslee's a good pick. The only one I'd go above that on is Tony Vitello. I hate you, Danny White.
For me, player-wise, I really am going to miss watching Andrew Fisher play this year. He just felt like just a classic Tennessee player. I mean, he had that swagger that we're used to seeing from Drew Gilbert, from Jordan Beck. Like, he had that thing. And so I am going to miss that this year from Andrew Fisher. But I do think that Tennessee's culture is going to stay the same. And I think that we'll have guys fill that shoes. And so let's get into some notable returners. And I think
the guys before we get to returners, sure. Did you say
Please.
Dean Curley?
I didn't, and I should have. You're right. I should have said Dean Curley.
Yeah, our guy Dean. He flies under the radar, but
yeah, he
was part of that national championship team.
Yeah, and he played great in Omaha in 2024. He really did. Had a good Omaha, and I thought he really raised his level of play at the highest moment. So he definitely deserves a mention. Thank you for stopping me. So yeah, notable returners. So these are really just kind of the big names that we're getting back. Some of them you recognize, some of them you're probably going to be like, who? But so the first one, Ariel Antigua, he's back. Manny Marin, Jay Abernathy, Reese Chapman, Levi Clark, Tegan Coons, Brandon Arvidsson, Chris Newstrom, and Stone Lawless. So those are kind of the guys you got coming back from last year's team. Who do you think takes the biggest step in your mind? Nick, you start us.
Ooh, hard to predict. I guess I'll go Levi Clark.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. Just full cards on the table. I'll pick somebody else just to have conversation. But like I was kind of alluding to, I really think Levi Clark is the guy that steps in and fills Andrew Fisher's shoes. I heard Eric Kane, I think, say that they're actually going to be putting Levi behind the plate a bit this year. We kind of all expected him to be playing first. But it sounds like he might be getting some run behind the plate. So I'm interested to see how that goes. But I really like Levi Clark. He's got that thing that we love out of Tennessee players. Again, I just really feel like he's going to be kind of a heart and soul, gritty, mouthy kind of player that we like at Tennessee. Jeff, who do you feel like takes the biggest step on this list?
Can I ask a question real quick? What are the candidates at catcher this year?
Levi Clark and Stone Lawless are the primary two. Yeah. Stone got some catching time last year. He came in and backed up Cannon Peebles, who we also lost. So I should have mentioned Cannon. But so those two are kind of your primary catchers coming into the season.
Yeah, I was going to go with Stone, kind of on the Ethan Davis thing. It seemed like I heard a lot of reports that Stone had a ton of potential, but he may have less of a path to playing time or whatever. So I'm going to say Stone for the record. I'm sure you guys will turn out to be right about Levi.
Now Stone's going to play a lot. I mean, he'll have an opportunity. So
yeah, for sure. So since Nick's already taken Levi Clark off the board, I guess who I would go with what's left is Ariel Antigua. I think Antigua has obviously been a phenomenal defensive player for us. He plays a great shortstop, great glove, and he's super likable because he's undersized. He's kind of got that chip on his shoulder type of player. But I really feel like Ariel's going to hit the ball better this year, and I think he's going to situate himself somewhere in the top of the lineup before the year's over.
So that would be the next level. I was surprised to hear you say him because I thought he was already playing pretty well defensively. You're saying the next level is his back gets hot.
Yeah, he's got to hit the
Yes.
ball better.
Yes.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Can
No,
Jay
absolutely.
Abernathy be faster? Can he take a step?
I don't know that Usain Bolt could be faster on a baseball field than Jay Abernathy. I mean, Jay Abernathy might be the fastest human being to run 90 feet in the history of the world. So
It's unreal.
I don't. Yeah, that guy's crazy. But yeah. So obviously, a lot of good names on this list that you're excited to see come back. We didn't even mention the pitchers, but Keegan Coons, Brandon Arvidsson.
Yeah,
I mean,
Arvidsson.
these guys. Yeah, I mean, these guys are phenomenal. I don't think you're gonna miss a beat in the rotation. My biggest concern, kind of what Jeff said, which is I think all of our biggest concern is coaching, right? You lost Frank Anderson. What does the pitching look like without Frank? Because Tony, whether it was coach speak or whether it was honest, Tony strikes me as an honest guy. He always talked about how Frank was the reason they were so successful on the mound. And so, you got to think that the rotation takes some sort of step back, probably because Frank's not there. But I don't know. I really like the arms we have coming into the season. I feel like Tennessee's going to be formidable, especially, like I said, especially on Friday night. I feel really good about our Friday night starters, which is likely going to be Keegan Coons.
It's 2026. Just swing the sticks, baby. Just swing sticks.
That's right. So notable newcomers. This is our kind of last thing roster-wise. We have some big names coming in. So Brady Frederick, Henry Ford, which obviously is iconic name, Americana. Cash Williams, which is a personal favorite of mine. Can Appenzeller, Garrett Wright, and Blaine Brown. So these are kind of our big name newcomers. Henry Ford is a transfer from Virginia. Cash Williams is a freshman. One of these guys is also from Virginia, and I'm blanking on which one. It might be Brady Frederick. Actually, no, I think he's
Evan Blanco.
Okay, thank you. Brady Frederick yes, Brady Frederick is from ETSU. Is that right?
That is right.
Okay. Yeah. So
did he pitch against us when they beat us last year?
I don't remember. Probably not, because that was a midweek game. So I would imagine not.
Probably
not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
He's probably their Friday night pitcher last year.
Probably so. So of these names, and obviously you guys might not know a ton about any of them, but who's going to be your kind of preseason pick of like who you're going to like the best off this list? I'll go first. I'm going to go with Cash Williams for obvious reasons. I like the name. I like the kid. I think he's going to get some opportunities, and I think he's going to shine when he gets his shot as a freshman. And he strikes me as the type of kid that once you give him a chance, you're not going to be able to get him off the field. That's just how he strikes me. So I really like Cash Williams coming to this season. Hope I'm not wrong. Jeff, go ahead.
This is totally off listening to podcasts, but Henry Ford was the name that I heard the most about. Oh, this kid looks good. He's coming ready. And so I'm going to go with Henry Ford, but I'm going to, Cash Williams will be number one in my heart too.
I'll do something different since Jeff said Henry Ford, but it's hard not to pick the Americana, the Henry Ford from Virginia guy. He hit 11 dingers last year, particularly hoping that he'll ramp that up and maybe like double that this year.
So the exact same as Jeff, to be clear.
Well, that's what I want to pick.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But since Jeff picked it, I'll go with Garrett Wright from Wright State.
Yes, sir.
Just fully finishing off whatever is left of that baseball program. Whatever's left after that Dylan, or after that
Drew Gilbert.
After that Drew Gilbert bomb just totally nuked their program. I mean, whatever's left of it can't be much. We're just going to finish it off by taking Garrett Wright away from them and beating them with him like week 3 of the season whenever we play them.
It's a pretty sweet run as a Wright named Tennessee fan. For a long time there weren't a lot of Wrights involved in Tennessee athletics, but we got Jalen. My son William played for a little while as a walk-on, and now we've got the Wright State Wright. I mean, jerseys are available for purchase with my name on them. It's a nice place to be.
I think he's from Bowling Green technically, but like Wright State everywhere. Area. So yeah,
we're everywhere. Wright supremacy.
So, guys, expectations. So year one of Josh Elander, what would you say defines a successful season for this team? Nick, you start us off.
A successful season. I'm going to say that you just have to expect, because of what you're saying, Frank Anderson leaving, I think, can you even say this out loud? I think might end up being a bigger deal than Tony V leaving, not because Tony V's not incredible, but because I think I have a lot of confidence in Josh Elander. So I just think the drop off from Tony V to Josh Elander won't be as big as the pitching coach drop off. So I think you do take a step back. And so I'll say a successful season is getting to a super regional.
Nice. Jeff, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm going at it from a different angle because of the ugliness of Tony V's departure. I think if they don't make it to a super regional and have a strong showing, that there's going to be a lot of blood in the water among Tennessee fans for Tennessee's administration. This everything school narrative, where Danny White's like posting the women's track team and the rugby team and whatnot, is already kind of festering among the fan base. If you have a big drop off in the baseball program after not bringing Tony V back in favor of like more money for the Lady Vols, I think it starts getting real ugly at the university. And I don't know how much they care about it. I think they'll still be able to sell tickets, but I think we've had kind of a sweet run post Pruitt where it was kumbaya, right? Like everybody all kind of united against the NCAA. We were having success in the big programs. There's been a pretty, maybe you don't want to say golden era for Tennessee athletics, but if you've got a down year from football, you've got basketball being inconsistent. Maybe they kind of put some gloss on at the end, and then baseball takes a big step back. I think you start getting a lot more hostility, open hostility among the fan base, and I don't really want that. I don't want Danny White around, but I don't want. I'd prefer to have him around with some of the big programs being competitive, and so I'm hoping they can make a decent showing at a super regional.
I think you guys are a little bit more calculated than I am. I just am tired of having to have expectations for various teams be middling. And so I'm going to say a successful season is getting Omaha. I think that this team's capable of it. I think that Josh Elander is going to step in and do a good job. I think that if Tennessee wants to be great, the expectations have to be raised. And I think Tennessee is becoming a force to be reckoned with in college baseball. And I'm going to set my expectations on the fact that we should expect to be in Omaha every single year competing for a championship. And so I'm going to say Omaha.
I was that close to saying that. And I still think a lot of what I said about a strong showing in the super regional may play out if they don't make it to Omaha. Yeah. I really don't think this fan base has an appetite for mediocrity, particularly with all the price gouging. And so for a lot of different reasons.
Why are the prices going up?
Yeah, a little bit.
Dude, that was a joke, right? Yeah, I was gonna say, dude, you couldn't sell your kidney and get into Lindsey Nelson this year, bro. It is crazy.
Dude, we have to pay Danny White a royalty for me mentioning his name multiple times here.
You're going to be in his mentions on Twitter if he ever hears this. I can tell you that.
Oh, I'm in his mentions on Twitter anyway, buddy. That's free.
Oh, man.
That's free.
Yeah,
I need to correct. I'm sticking with Garrett Wright for my best player, but he came from Bowling Green. I double checked myself. What I was remembering is that he is from the same town where Wright State is. I knew there was some kind of connection. So that program's so bad he didn't even pick the state at his hometown program that shares the same name. So good grief.
Oh, me. So, guys, last thing here about baseball. I want to just make note. Tennessee is currently tied with Texas for the third best odds to win the national championship at plus 1,500. That was much higher than I expected us to be in the national championship odds, especially with the turnover like we've talked about. What do you think? I mean, can Tennessee win a national championship this year? Simple as. Nick?
Yes, absolutely. They are talented enough to do that, 100%. I don't expect that they will, but they are talented enough to do it. Wouldn't be super shocked. Would be thrilled. Would love to see it.
Totally defer to y'all. Y'all know better than I do.
I don't think it's likely, obviously, but I think Tennessee is going to be better than some people expect, especially the casual college baseball, watcher that has been, keeping up with Tennessee's, meteoric rise in the last few seasons. And I think that people are going to be surprised with how good we are, even though we lost our coach, which sounds contradictory to what we've been saying this whole podcast. But I think for us, we expect us to take a step back, and I think we will slightly. But I think to the average fan on the outside looking in, that's not a Tennessee fan, they're going to be shocked with that we're still as good as we are, even though we've had this much turnover. So, yeah, I think Tennessee's capable, like Nick said. All right, guys. So that pretty much wraps up what we got on the docket for tonight. Does anybody have anything else to add?
Oh, I just wanted to note that Danny White sucks. Just need to get that on the record.
Thank you. It was not on the record before, so I'm glad you did that. Nick, why don't you go ahead and plug our socials, man?
Absolutely, folks. You can find us on YouTube. You can find this live on YouTube. You can find us on Apple and Spotify, which are the places where most of you are going to find your podcasts. And you can find us on X at volatile_1998. Please tell all your Vol friends who are, whether they know it or not, dying every day, just a little bit more, that if they would like to go through this with somebody, and they should, that they can check us out on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and X. Come and die with us. We bid you come and die.
I do want to wrap up here with a special announcement. So next Wednesday night, Tennessee plays Mississippi State at 8:00 when we usually record Wednesday nights at 8:00. So we are going to do our first ever live Volatile episode on YouTube. A listener, please be praying for us to not have too many technical difficulties. But I want to encourage you guys that listen to us, so that's you, Mom and Dad. Please, if you would, jump in the chat, get on there, run those numbers up from 0 to 2, so we can have at least 2 live listeners.
You'll have at least 3 because
that's right, Chief, baby.
Chief, my dad, Chief, listens to us every week.
Hey, Chief.
He specifically said, "Can I listen to you guys live when you record tonight?" And I didn't tell him we were doing a live show next week. So when he listens to this tomorrow, he'll be excited because he's wanting to hear a live show. So
I'll throw my fan in the bucket here. So William, ask Mom if you can sit up late.
So we're doing this live episode for you, Will and Chief.
Minimum.
Will and Chief, this live one's for you. Guys, thank you for listening. And remember, it's terminal.